Good morning. Welcome to another Coffee and Dev episode where you get to grow as a developer in the time it takes to drink your coffee. And we do this every Wednesday and Friday. Today's talk is interview and hire. And what I mean is not you interviewing at a company and not you getting hired. I mean you interviewing someone and you hiring someone. So, um, this is something that's been on my mind for quite some time. There might be some controversial points. I don't know. We'll see. But I wanted to start with talking about the process itself. So before you even start interviewing someone, getting your recruitment team on point with you to understand that you need a solid process and it needs to be well detailed. And the reason why we want it well detailed is the candidate who is applying for your company should know exactly what each stage means and the requirements. And most people who are hearing this go, of course, every company does that. Every company says, like, you're going to probably have these 4 things to go through. And the trick is, though, or the thing that's being missed is it's not detailed at all. You need to actually have a real plan, not just like we do HR, we do a behavioral, we do technical, and we do like a follow-up pairing program or something like that. I mean, you need to actually prep the candidate. So on the behavioral, you should be like the typical, like you need recruitment to have actual points of what you want to discuss about. So typically in these conversations, you'll be asked about challenges that you faced, times that you had to face, implementations that didn't go your way, weighing out the requirements between product and development, like actual practical questions that are going to be actually asked is the biggest thing. And the reason why we want this is candidates who are applying to the company are going to actually prepare, or they're going to say this is way too much work and quit in the process. They're just going to ghost you, or they're going to say they have another offer or whatever. And fantastic. That reduces the amount of candidates that we need to go through. That reduces the time that it takes up from leads and development. And you get down to the serious candidates that you actually care about. Because there are plenty of candidates who come into the pipeline and they think, okay, maybe it'll be an easy process I can just get through, and I'll just sail through the process and I'll get hired and no worries. But when you lay out exactly what the process looks like, and if they feel like it's outside their depth, a lot of times people will just ghost or say, sorry, I'm going to pursue XYZ. And this just eliminates the amount that we have to go through. So you really need to get on the same page with your recruitment team to weed out candidates. And I want to show you an example that I thought was actually pretty much perfect. I didn't zoom in, but let's just zoom in a bit. Is the Wealthsimple, what do they call it? Their interview guide. Like, this is what essentially you reach out to recruitment and they do a little intro and assume you meet the requirements of like comp and what they're looking for. Then the follow-up is this that you get. So you get like a little nice intro about the company. You cover what the actual teams in the company are, the actual products they have, different type of sections, I guess, that you're in the company. And then they walk you through the entire journey. Like, here, like this is a phase that you go through, and then they say what we're focusing on and like what are the expectations in this. And then you're going to do a project review, and it's not a coding interview. What do they do in this within product planning, project management, and overall impact. So they want you to come prepared with something and an in-depth explanation of your work on a product that you're proud of. So, and then bring your own system design. They cover, I guess, something in-depth presentation of the system you've helped design, and that allows the interviewer to really go deep. But you have As an interviewee, you know exactly what's being expected. Like, look, we recommend providing visual aids to explain the system, screenshots, virtual whiteboard, etc. We're hoping to understand the technical planning and designs that went in the project and how you transitioned. Like, these are actual things that that are going to be covered that you should come prepped for. And then they go over a bunch. They have leadership, and then they have pair programming depending on the role and things like that. So this is really spot on to what we're looking for. If your process isn't that detailed, then you should change it, because this really helps get high quality interviewees. And that brings me to kind of the next, which is the actual interview. Like, as you saw how detailed and structured they have their guide for the interview, the same thing for what you're doing is on your interview, you want to have a plan that is going to remove the bias. Like, this is my 2 cents. I think the current interview process is broken. 100%, 200% is broken. If you're sitting there and you ask, essentially, if you're not Fang and you sit there and you ask any sort of data structure or algo question, then your interview process, in my opinion, is 100% broken. It is such a false positive on it. I've hired people who aced it, multiple hackathons, just spot on candidate and everything like this a long time ago. I always remember this. And we brought them in and they didn't do anything. They literally sat there and just watched YouTube the entire time. Like, so what, they knew how to do like reversing a B tree or whatever, or some sort of data structure. And the worst part was that they were in school, so they were primed for this interview. Like, we always talk about bias on traits as a human, but we don't talk about the bias of the interview process that's skewed towards basically new grads or people currently in school. It's like, oh, we're going to do data structure and algos. Wow, they impressed us because they knew all this stuff. And oh man, for someone of that experience, I'm very surprised that they knew that. Well, yeah, they've spent literally 4 years taking classes on that. What would you expect? And I mean, you could say that that is the point, is if they couldn't answer that, why would you even hire them? Okay. But I mean, I've hired plenty of people who, if I honestly put them through an interview that is structured like that, they would fail. Yet they're some of the most productive people I've worked with, right? So I really want people to revisit this and rethink this. I think you should focus on your technical being about asking a lot of and how. And what I mean there is you set them up, the same thing that you saw on the Wealthsimple guide, with expectations. So prior, you send them over some sort of architecture diagram, let's say. And it can be actually applicable to the company. Like, you remove anything that's sensitive or whatnot, but on a high level, okay, great. You send that. And then you ask them prior in an email, this is a diagram that we're going to cover. We're going to focus on improvements. We're going to focus on migrating from this system to XYZ. And you give them a couple points that you actually plan to ask, and you do ask during the interview. But the thing is, they show up, and they see this diagram and they're like, oh, well, my improvement would be adding a caching layer between the database and the back end because we don't want to overwhelm it. And you're like, and? Well, we want to add the caching layer because we don't want to overwhelm the database. And? Well, that would be bad when we have an outage. Okay, how will we have an outage? Well, the reads would be substantial, and eventually we'd hit some sort of bottleneck, or, this caching layer is a lot easier to scale out because in the diagram you gave me, we're using X, and, you get into this, and then you just can go back and you'd be like, oh, okay, so how would the caching work? How would we evict? When would we evict? Like, what would be how would we deal with the cache being out? Like, this caching system going down? Do we care about that? Like, you're actually having a real practical conversation. Conversations I have in real life, in my job all the time, in real scenarios, instead of theoretical garbage, honestly. So, if your bar is that you gotta have so many applicants that you just need to set a standard that is absolutely insane and a threshold that's going to require people to put in 4 to 6 months or whatever, 1 to 6 months of preparation work to get hired, great. You're fine. That you have to, that's how you're eliminating people and reducing the time and effort of going through everyone. Okay, I get it. But a lot of companies, it's not so much a struggle to go through everyone. It's finding people that are capable of achieving what we want without setting requirements that are just not really applicable to day in, day out. So that's my argument on the technical. And then after that, okay, the next thing is, well, how do we actually make sure that their core competency is there? Because what happens that, they just had coaching during, the technical portion of going through the diagram, and we gave the diagram up front, so they might have had a ton of notes on it. Okay, you do a panel, an expert panel. You can do it 2 ways. One, you ask them to pick a topic that they should be considered an expert on and provide 3 of them. And then the panel is going to be considered novice, and the interviewee needs to ramp up the novice panel to appropriate level. So basically, you think of it as interacting with junior devs, and you want to bring them up to speed on how something works. The more common way that I see and the way that I prefer is you give 3 topics. You tell the interviewee, you can pick any one of these 3, and we want you to come in and have a conversation at a high to expert level kind of conversation. And you give them prep time. If they're like, honestly, none of these fit, you can either reshuffle, give them a different topic that would accommodate your panel as well, or you just give them a bunch of time. You're like, look, okay, you want more prep time? No problem. Here's 2 weeks. And people can say like, oh, how's that different from the take-home test? Because the take-home test is like similar and it's unpaid. Not entirely, because the take-home test gets scrapped. It has no value to you. The panel stuff, regardless of if you actually end up going to the company or not, is stuff that you've actually learned. So that's my thoughts on that. So for me, one of the best interviews I ever had was at a company, and they asked me, okay, the panel gave you 3 topics. One of them was stream event processing, and that's the one I picked. And we talked 2 hours about it. And we went all the way from starting on a monolithic system to microservices to having a message system in the microservices, and how would they connect and what would be pitfalls and how would we deal with the legacy system. So that's that. I think the process is broken. I think there should be change. And then the thing I think a lot of people really forget is you got to sell yourself and the company, because a lot of times people will have interviewees who they're excited and like, wow, this would be a great fit. And the other side continues to interview elsewhere because they just don't feel interested. And this is why I think you can't be super theory on your interview. Is the questions you should ask are actual real examples of what you're facing today at the company, because you entice the candidate to understand, like, this is the problems you would solve. These are the challenges we have today. And they're able to see where they would fit in that puzzle. So with that said, for more content, you know where to find me. I should just remove TikTok. I don't post enough. But on Twitch, I do a bunch of streams that don't go on YouTube. And you can always find these videos on YouTube. And that is all for this Coffee and Dev. I hope you learned something new. And I hope you challenge the existing process of your interviews to build something better for next week. Adios.